Dr. Jeff, it's yours.
All right. Thank you, Rhonda. Thank you so very much. Hello, everyone. It's great to see you all again. Denise, how are you? Thank you for being here as always and helping along. And hello, everyone. Roseanne, Tim, Tamika, Mara, Una, Chelsea, Christina, Jennifer, Matthew, Carol, Lori, Jennifer, all of you. It's great, great, great to see you all. I think I may have talked to many of you last year. So, hello to everyone. So, thank you, Rhonda. Thank you to Mesa Wellness for having me be here today. So, today we're going to address protecting your mental health while consuming news and social media. Why? Because we're wired for wellness. That's part of our theme. And so I thought it would be important for us to talk about our mental health, especially when it comes to all of the things that we're dealing with in the world today with regard to political news, with regard to social media, and so on. So, Denise, I'm going to try to share my screen here. Let me know if it works. Let's see, share. And let me go to, I think this should be the one. Um, just want to make sure I pull the right one. Let's see. Is that the proper
Perfect.
one?
Perfect.
Yep. Rhonda, is that it? All right. And I can advance the screen, right? Hold on one second. Just want to make sure. Okay. And that works too, correct?
Yes, it does.
All right, great. So why don't we just go ahead and get the party started? First of all, Rhonda, thank you for such a wonderful presentation. I learned so much. You hit on a lot of the particular points that I was going to make, and I think they really do work hand in hand. Let me make sure we have enough headroom there. Okay, everyone. So, yeah, let's talk about protecting your mental health, especially in the very wired world that we're in. Rhonda talked many times about the Jetsons are here. We are in the future. Absolutely agree. I remember when I was just a little boy living in Brooklyn, New York, back in 19, maybe 66 or 67, and I was watching a show called Star Trek, and there was something called a communicator. And I never thought I would see a communicator in my lifetime, but yet here it is. It's a time machine, it's a communicator, it does it all, and we're living in that world now. But guess what? We use it for everything. I'm in New York, by the way. Well, actually in Connecticut, but I was in New York during the week. Everyone was glued to their communicator, right? And so we are wired in. It is something that has become an addiction, and I completely get it. And we're also living in the world of AI, and I get that too. But sometimes that can become overwhelming, especially since we have such important work in our school system. So let me share some anchoring thoughts with you, if I may. First and foremost, when it comes to information and when it comes to consuming information, you're not just consuming it for yourself, but also for your students because you are passing that knowledge along. Whether you're a teacher, social worker, nurse, school safety, administrator, principal, no matter what it is, teacher's aide, you are bringing in information and you're passing it down to the younger generation. You are the emotional anchors in times of uncertainty. We're not going to get into any of the politics today, but you know we are living in a time of uncertainty. And if you don't believe me, get over to your gas station and fill up. All right. So today is about protecting you so you can continue to protect the youngsters that you work with in every capacity. But you've got to take care of you. And right now, we are completely overwhelmed by the political news, by global news, by national news, by international news. The cost of living has gone up dramatically. It is rough out there. And because we're on our communicators, computer, beam me up. Because we are on our communicators all the time, what ends up happening is that it can completely overwhelm us. So in education, the stress doesn't stop with you. It's also your students, but it's also the world that we're bringing into our own minds and into our classrooms, into our schools. So it's important to know you're not only managing your own reactions where things become so difficult, but you're also managing theirs too. I will tell you, for my own children, I'm like the old man in the shoe. I have so many kids, I don't know what to do. I have a 33-year-old, a 32-year-old, a 25-year-old, a 23-year-old, 11-year-old, and a 9-year-old, and I just turned 70 on Saturday. I've got to retire at some point, at least with having children. But I can tell you, with my own children, when they see me watching news, consuming news, and so on, and they hear me screaming at the screen, "Really, Joe? Did you really mean that, Morning Joe? Come on. Tell me the truth here." When they see all of that, they get overwhelmed by it. So it's important that we also understand what it is that we are managing and doing it in a way that is productive, because our children at home and certainly our children in our schools are taking in everything that we're saying and dealing with not only their own issues in the world, but as well how we are overwhelmed. So today we're going to talk about how media impacts the brain and classroom functioning. And Rhonda did a superb job of talking about what happens with neurotransmitters and what happens with inflammation, and how what happens in the executive command center, what happens in the frontal lobes and the amygdala, how that impacts not just the rest of our brains and how we think, but impacts our bodies. We'll talk about how you can limit some of that media intake. Sometimes you just have to turn it off, and sometimes you have to manage it down. And Rhonda, this one's for you. I said, turn it off. That's an old Teddy Pendergrass thing, and Rhonda loves when I do that. Sometimes you just have to turn it off. Turn off the lights and turn off that TV. We'll talk about establishing boundaries, not just with the media that we bring in, not just with social media, not just with news, but also how we establish boundaries with our students and our children, how we can use social media productively, because it is a tool that was put in place initially for us to be in the world at all times. But unfortunately, it's a situation of we didn't land on Plymouth Rock. It landed on us. We are in a future shock right now when it comes to issues of political news, when it comes to social media. It just takes up every part of our lives. And we'll talk about practical strategies for staff and student well-being. I just want to say I love, Denise, what you're saying here. For as much as I use my cell phone, what works for me is to keep it almost always on Do Not Disturb, DND. ADHD brain means I check it often, and that's what we all do, Denise. So that is a great point. And Marcia, you're saying every time you turn on the TV or phone, all that negative energy. And that's true also, Marcia. And all I have to say to you is Marcia, Marcia, Marcia. That's an old line from a movie, and I can't even remember what it is. But let's talk about the reality. What is the reality as to what we are experiencing in the world about political news? Well, the American Psychological Association says 21% of Americans report being estranged from family, right? Because of where they are on the political spectrum, to the point where almost 22% have blocked another family member online. I can share with you, and this is the absolute truth, that where I am on the political spectrum is very different from where some of my other family members are. And I've noticed we don't get together as much as we used to because we're afraid of having conversations as to what is going on in the world. And we don't want to be estranged but it is still happening. We talk on the phone all the time, but the get-togethers are getting less and less. And please remember something. United we stand, divided we fall. So we have to find common ground. Research from YouGov found that nearly 4 in 10 adults would feel disappointed if their children partnered up with someone who had a different political beliefs. Really? Is that where we are right now? The answer is yes. A February 2024 Pew poll revealed that 55% often feel angry after engaging with online discussions because we're going back and forth on our phones. 40% say online conflict is a major source of stress in their lives. And I don't know about you, but when I go on some of these social media apps and I see some of the things happening, it does cause some real stress. 65% say US adults often feel exhausted by content on social media. So, bottom line is that we know that heavy social media use in adults, what does it cause? Increased anxiety, depression, loneliness, sleep disruption, psychological distress, all of the things that Rhonda was talking about in the previous talk. And why is that happening? Because we are wired in. But today we'll be talking about wired in for wellness and how we do that. So let's talk about schools specifically. School related crisis coverage, the school shootings. I don't know about you, but when I watch that stuff, and I think I know about you, when you watch it, you know what happens. It's something that causes a lot of stress and post traumatic stress, and it just is overwhelming to us because we all work in the education field and our hearts cry every day. Public discourse about education and current political initiatives of the Department of Education. Again, we're not going to get into the politics of this. This is for someone else to discuss or for you to discuss privately because I know it's very touchy. But we know that the Department of Education is going through a major overhaul, and many people do not agree with it. Anxiety from news, social media, not just about schools, but also about current events. So we have to deal with everything that is going on in our purview, in our arena, in that field, in that area that we call education. And then on top of that, it's 24/7 as far as the news, dealing with that and dealing with what's going on in the world. Denise says, again, my mom and I are aligned politically, but she lacks self-awareness and thinks nothing of projecting her anxieties onto me. And Denise, I'm doing, regrettably, I was doing that to my kids, but I had to catch myself because if you talk the talk, you better walk the walk. So I have found ways that I'll share with you, both personally and professionally, on how we get wired into wellness, not wired into being overwhelmed. So, all of the things that we know, and just to bring it all home, all news all the time, right? It's one of the things that we hear from one of our radio stations here. I think it's WCBS. Constant exposure to breaking news, crisis updates. Stress response happens, right? Physical symptoms may arise, including that fatigue, anxiety, depression. So, negative media does play a role. And what is the impact on the brain? Again, Rhonda talked a little bit about this, where we see that the amygdala, which is the emotional command center, how it processes that information, also impacts what happens with the executive functioning in the frontal lobe. So we need to be real careful of that. But it takes a toll on our physical, emotional, and mental health. It can cause or exacerbate symptoms of PTSD that some of us may have. Yes, Roseanne, you're absolutely right. We're turning into adrenaline junkies because what it does, it releases adrenaline, noradrenaline, which gives us that oomph that we need to rise to the occasion. But if it happens all the time, then it begins to wear down our emotional and physical systems, immune system, but as well, we talked about dopamine. You mentioned that, Rhonda. That is that feel good neurotransmitter. Every time something, brings out that dopamine, something that's pleasurable, dopamine says, ooh, that's good. Do that again. And guess what happens? When we're on our phones, social media, getting the news, trolling, doing doom scrolling, dopamine hit, dopamine hit, dopamine hit. And so, Roseanne, you're absolutely right. It turns us into these adrenaline dopamine junkies. So over time, it begins to wear us down. Too much of a good thing. So we end up having poor decision making, decreased sensitivity and empathy towards others. In other words, we call that burnout. Increases anxiety and trouble sleeping, and impacts personal and our professional lives. Medicine advertisements and chronic condition reminders every 15 minutes on TV does cause anyone else anxiety by reminder of all the ways where we can become sick. Absolutely. When I'm watching either MSNBC or some other program, you see that coming up constantly. So I'm going to ask some of you, and you already did this. Roseanne, you talked about it. Denise, you talked about it. Lynn, you talked about it. Here's the question, and drop it in the chat. How has news or social media impacted you? What has it done for you? And I'm not talking about in a positive way. What has it done to you in a very negative way? Hi, Shannon. How are you?
Good.
Great.
Sorry, I was in a meeting. I was listening in, but I had this other meeting.
Yeah, I
So,
love your last name, by the way.
oh, thanks.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I
So
will jump in. I'll say that it gives me anxiety watching the news.
it gives you anxiety.
Yep.
Exactly. Denise says near constant anxiety. Carol, I tend not to watch the news. Good for you, Carol. Beverly, it makes me angry and I'm more short tempered with some people. Kathleen, anxiety and stress. Marsha. Yes, if I watch late in the evening, it affects my sleep. Absolutely, Marsha. It worries me, Tracy says. Sean, it causes anxiety. Amy, same thing. I'm not nearly as informed. Social media is a time. So, yes, you're getting it. You could share this amongst one another, but that's exactly what is going on. By the way, I noticed that when Rhonda was presenting, that you all were very active on the meeting chat. Keep on doing it. It says that you are involved. Thank you for being part of this discussion. So, what is the effect on school staff? Well, now imagine absorbing this before interacting with your students or your colleagues, right? And you're going in there. And Shannon, I know that's part of what you're saying, right? Or responding to students who are also overwhelmed. Our kids are watching the news. They know they're not as safe as they need to be, even though you all are doing everything you can to give them physical and psychological safety. Reduce classroom patience. Yeah, sometimes when we feel that that the sky is falling down, we are much less tolerant or much more anxious, and therefore that plays out with what happens with our students. I've seen it with myself and my own daughter. We had a huge argument when I saw something that was happening politically, and my daughter, who's graduating law school, was on a phone scrolling and not paying attention as I saw things were developing on TV. Emotional reactivity and decision fatigue, right? We all get some of that. Amy says just the lack of positive news is enough to send anyone into panic or trigger feelings that are not healthy. Yes, kindergartners feel their adults' tension. They absolutely do, Tracy Lynn. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So, when your brain is overloaded, what happens? Your ability to regulate a classroom or regulate within the school building or administratively what you're doing decreases. And this is not a personality issue, it is cognitive depletion. And let's talk about the stress multiplier. Some of you may have heard of this. Students mirror adult anxiety, as we heard from Tracy. Uncertainty in you can cause uncertainty with them. Because let's face it, let's be honest. Again, we're not going to get into the politics here, but we really feel that the country is changing rapidly, and some of us feel lost. We feel untethered, unanchored. And so subconsciously, we may even express that to our students and not even be aware. You consume the news, and your students do as well, by the way. So they're bringing that back into the classroom and want to talk about it. And you already have your feelings about it. And then you have to manage both what you're dealing with as far as news and social media and what they're dealing with. So you're absorbing stress directly and indirectly, and that's a multiplier effect. What's happening at home and what's happening at school. So my next question is, have you experienced that multiplier effect? And you could just give just a brief comment as to how that has happened with you. Okay? So we'll read some of what you have to say. Ashley said, by the way, I feel like social media is starting to amp up the hantavirus right now. Yes, it is. As a matter of fact, this Sunday, 5 p.m. Eastern, I'll be on CNN talking about the psychological effects and the panic that some people are starting to experience around that. Okay? So if you get a chance, tune in. I know it is a Sunday. You're getting ready for a Monday, which is a fun day, depending on how you see things. But, if you get a chance, check it out. So, what is the goal? What are we looking for? What is this all about as far as wanting to be wired in for wellness? Well, first of all, it's about balance, isn't it? The goal is finding the balance between feeling informed and educated while not becoming stressed out by it. That's what we want. We want to have enough awareness about the news and social media to stay healthy enough so it doesn't drain us, but to teach and to interact with our students in a healthier manner. Carrie says, currently I'm on a field trip riding the bus. Our kids are playing some fun pencil and paper games, old school stuff like we used to do. I think we are on to something. That's right. Question is, do they have 10 pencils or only two? That's an inside joke. All right, enough of those jokes. So let's talk about limiting news and social media access. So what are some of the things that we can, Tracy, you got the joke, I see. So what are some of the things that we can actually, listen, if I wasn't laughing, I'd be crying, Tracy, okay? And so humor is very important in these very crazy times that we're in. So let's talk about how do we limit news and social media access? Because yes, as Teddy Pendergrass said, we can turn it off, but we do want to be informed. We do want to know what's going on in the world. If you want to turn it off, that's fine too. But so we can limit the news and social media. So let's talk about news and social media platforms are really designed to grab attention, right? That's why we have those algorithms. That's why we have the clickbait. And they grow, they get more eyeballs from fear or anger content. And that's why we know why some of these social media companies are being sued. One in particular has been sued and they've lost that case because it really is about not just us as educators, as school employees working with our children on how they can consume media in a healthier way, right? It's also about the social media companies themselves. But until they step up and stop grabbing eyeballs and doing more of the things that they need to do as far as education, it's going to be up to us. So one of the things we can do in staying healthy is avoiding that clickbait and sensationalized stories. When seeking information, try to stay on reputable, fact-based sources. And they are still out there. You got to look for them, but they are there. It's not opinion, but about just getting the facts, okay? Alerts and notifications on smartphones, well, you know what they do, and I think, Denise, you talked about that. They create a constant stream of negative updates, Okay, more war. And I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of the titles that they use are very misleading. Okay, and it's about again grabbing your attention, but to things that are frivolous or that make you more upset. So try to avoid that as much as possible, and consider mental health evenings. And someone talked about this where you're not consuming news, where you're not consuming social media, where maybe you're not even looking at school emails on a particular night, other than the essential things that you need, but just maybe listening to music, listening to jazz. For those of you who are into jazz, there's a station called WZUM online. It's out of Pittsburgh. Beautiful jazz. So instead of sitting down and watching the usual political shows through the evening, sometimes it's just throwing a couple of logs in the fireplace and just absolutely listening to some jazz. Let me see. Carrie says here, I'm sorry, Marcia says, I don't watch the nightly news as much. Also, I'm not on my phone scrolling as much. So that's great. That helps you cut back. Sarah says, so nice to turn the phone off and read a book. Do you remember books? Aren't they great? By the way, I actually like the physical book, not just the tablet. Denise says, I use Facebook heavily for activism and organizing. We're going to talk about that, Denise, and a reason to get up in the morning. We're going to talk about that. Tracy says, sometimes I leave my phone in my glove compartment. And that's why when you open up that glove compartment, it's blowing up, right? So I think that's a great idea. So as well, we can establish boundaries. So how do we do that? So look, I'm getting just to show you this, I'm getting something just came in from the New York Times. UFO files are released. The Pentagon made public never before seen records. The initial images are murky and show what could be anything. Did I need to know that this morning? It could be anything. Great. Okay? So again, these sorts of alerts. So establish boundaries. Choose reading. We talked about that, a good book over constant scrolling. Set a specific time of day to check your updates rather than staying connected all day long. I know for some of us who have multiple screens, we keep one screen on news. Hey, check maybe 3 times a day and that's it, or twice a day. Aim to engage earlier in the day with news to avoid stressful content before bedtime. We talked about that, and that was important. And set boundaries with news, sometimes with the parents, sometimes with the student emotional demands, where you do need a day to recover. You need your weekends to recover. And it's really important to support without absolutely absorbing all the time. Okay? Denise says, because I noticed I was getting dopamine hits from playing word games on my phone, I went and bought a huge book of word games to try to sometimes do analog versions rather than always on my phone. Absolutely. So here's the question, and you already answered it, Denise. How do you limit news intake or set boundaries? And I'll share with you one of the things that I do is when I do come home, I will turn on a news station. I'll watch it for 30 minutes and then I turn it off. And I will not watch it before going to bed. Okay? I'll read a good horror novel from Stephen King because that horror novel is less than what I'm seeing on TV. Julie says, I let parents and students know that I usually do not check my school email over the weekends. Yes, absolutely. Okay, so that's one of the things you can do to set boundaries. Anything else you do? And I know we've looked at this and we've talked about it. So let's see. Sean says only check school email at school and only engage in social media on the weekends. Wow, that's great. That's wonderful. Okay. All right. So let's talk about productive social media use. Okay. Because social media is something that can be a force for good, and that's what it should have been and was set up for. Okay, so first of all, use social media, and I think Denise or someone else talked about this, to communicate with your family or friends, but avoid circulating negative stories. Okay, so I've looked at some social media from my children, and they're only putting positive things out there or congratulating one another on, accomplishing something as far as academics. Avoid comparing your classroom or teaching to others online, by the way, right? Because we all have our own style. Avoid teacher burnout culture on social media. So I know that we have teachers and other school staff who may go online and may talk about a lot of the things that they're going through. And I think in some ways that's very healthy, but not when you're on it all the time. Okay. Instead, maybe sharing things around empowerment strategies as educators. Marcia says, I have set a time limit on how long I'm on my cell phone, and that's also for YouTube and games. Remember that social media is a highlight reel, not real life. So avoid comparing yourself to others in that way, and think about what else you could be doing with your time. And we know there's a lot more. Here's a big one, and Denise agrees with this one. I get a feeling. Be an upstander and not a bystander when it comes to social media and what you see on it. So instead of feeding into the negative stories or being trolled or doing doom scrolling, get involved and volunteer, right? Believe it or not, you can influence change in your community, your greater community, Michigan community, and as well, of course, with your school community. Now, Denise happens to do some of that by using social media, and that's absolutely fantastic. Consider attending a city council meeting or town hall, or PTA meetings, even if you're not a member. Join your community board. Vote. Exercise your right to vote in local elections. Let your voice be heard. That's one of the major issues in our country, that we have so much voter dissatisfaction. But if you don't vote, you're not empowered, and then you become even more overwhelmed by a lot of the bad news. So don't be a victim, be a victor, and make sure you get involved. And model empathy, respect, and kindness, even when you are dealing with a lot of these things that you see on social media that may be negative. Another way that you could be wired in for wellness is modeling behaviors. Model emotional regulation for your students, especially if there's some negative story going around. Show them how you process it, how you think about it, what are the points and the counterpoints, and you can actually even bring that into the classroom. So in many ways, what you're doing is you're teaching them and you're modeling critical thinking instead of just reacting. And as well, model balance rather than overexposure. Unplugging very quickly, positivity. So it's easy to focus in on only anxiety and fear, but focus on the positivity. As Mr. Rogers said, it's a wonderful day in the neighborhood, but at the same time, we also have to look for the helpers. And your colleagues are on the front lines. So one of the things you can do is to send them a note once in a while. I appreciate what you're doing. Thank you for the school safety. Thank you for assisting our teacher. Thank you for being there for the parents. Thank you for being there for the students. Thank you for keeping our facility as clean as you do. Send those notes, because in many ways, everyone else who's overwhelmed by the news can have that act of kindness that really does help them. Have a day when everyone in your home goes screen free. No tablets, no TVs or computers. We do that here every Sunday. Meditation. We talked about the Mesa Wellness website. We talked about all of the things that are offered to you by Mesa. One of those is meditation. It's great to practice that mindfulness. It's on demand, as well as you have mindfulness coaching, on demand Pilates and yoga. Those things are very important. Reset between your classes. That means taking a breath of fresh air, going to the schoolyard, taking a short walk if you can, walking the hallways and just saying hello to the kids. Breathe. Often we don't breathe. Why have we stopped breathing? We're like, oh. But you can practice your 4-7-8 breathing, breathing in for 4 seconds, taking it in, 1, 2, 3, 4 through your nose, holding it for 7 seconds, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then breathing out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, as my favorite pastor, Joel, what's Joel's last name out of Houston, Texas? Osteen. Won't you try it with me? Won't you try it with me? So let's breathe in through our noses, 4 seconds. Hold it for 7. Breathe out 8 through your mouths. If you do 3 cycles of that every morning, it helps you get grounded and it helps you go out into the world and deal with our students, with our schools. Okay, so that's important to do. So, some topics for discussion that you can share amongst yourselves and share with us is, what do you think will be the most challenging about cutting down on media consumption? What's the toughest for you, especially if you're in the front lines of education and you need education, right? What are some ways you can manage fear or negativity in the classroom? Again, I think talking about critical incidents would be very important. And how do you notice stress from media consumption? These are things that we can begin talking about, which becomes part of the conversations that we have with one another. But let's just take a moment and ask you and put it in the chat. Given those particular questions, what is one small thing that you will do differently starting tomorrow? And let's go ahead and take a moment and share that, because change begins with one decision, right? Not 10. So let's see. Carrie says a screen-free day. Absolutely. Cindy, more positive thoughts. Positivity is everything. Screen time boundaries. Protect my peace at home. More books, less screen. I agree. Read more paper books. Yes, I love that. Setting a limit on screen time. And I do that with my kids. No more Facebook after 7 p.m. That's right. Your face can be in the right place, and it doesn't have to be on Facebook. It could be in front of your family. Journal. Journaling is so important because there's only so much we can hold in our minds emotionally and as far as information. So writing it down. I noticed that friends separated from me when I withdrew from media consumption. They remain engaged. Sometimes you got to let go of some folks if they're not on the same page with you. Family walk after dinner. Yes, that is so beautiful. Rhonda talked about the importance of exercise. Walking is exercise. Walking helps us talk. Walking is great. Only 11 minutes a day of walking or any exercise changes our minds and our bodies. Denise says it's hard for me to do, but it would be very good not to start immediately with my morning phone routine, right? Weather, Facebook, games. Yes, absolutely. Maybe it's just going outside and getting a breath of fresh air while you have your Java or your orange juice or your turmeric in your ginger lemon tea, right? Reading out in the sunshine. Kendra, I love reading out in the sunshine. Vitamin D is so important. As a matter of fact, Shannon just got up and she's taking a walk right now. Just kidding, Shannon. Being present. That's what we call that's what we call mindfulness. Crafting with my granddaughter more. Yes. A lot less online and a lot more in line with being with family and more positive shout outs to colleagues. And all those things are important. So let me give a closing message here and then we can open it up for discussion, if you will. Rhonda, perhaps you'd like to lead some discussion with this, and I'd love to get your thoughts on what we talked about. But my closing message is simply this, and I say it to you from the heart: all of you matter. Your well being matters because you are our leaders. Taking care of yourself is part of taking care of your students. And the work you do is powerful, but so is your responsibility to yourself. And it's important to stay wired for wellness off of social media and off of that news. Okay? So we can go back to, if you anything you'd like to talk about here. What do you think will be the most challenging about cutting down on media consumption? Rhonda, maybe, I'd love to hear from you about that
Okay.
because you are wired all the time because that's part of your work.
You're profiling me, Jeff. Yes. Wired all of the time. And I can underscore some of the symptoms, I'll call them. I don't want to diagnose myself with anything, but it does affect me mentally. It does affect me socially. It affects relationships. It kind of reframes your perspective on things. So it can be
Hmm.
it can be dangerous. It can affect our mental health. So we have to be self-discerning. I have to remind myself to be self-aware, self-discerning, and realize when it is actually affecting me, and I have to pivot and be intentional about engaging in some of the strategies you all have listed here in the chat, as well as other strategies. Now, I want to pose a question to the platform here. We know what we could do for our personal wellness. What are some ideas that we could create for our work community, our work environment? Because, a lot of us have to engage in social media. What is an activity we could do to help our colleagues? Anybody got any ideas? Help me out. Let's do a little group brainstorming, something that somebody could walk away with.
Well, I'll tell you one thing. Brooke Marceau can invite me to her beach home there.
I like that. Let's plan a retreat.
Rhonda, we've done challenges among staff, so just like getting steps in, and then we just track it on a spreadsheet.
Yeah. Okay, instead of doing it online digitally. Oh, yeah, I like that. Or just
Yeah,
doing things to get people moving. I like that.
yeah,
Marcia, talk to each other more. We don't do that enough.
Yes.
Absolutely. So it's like combating social isolation, because when people are mentally heavy or mentally, if I can say this, unwell, often the social media channels are very enticing. We get engaged and start scrolling and isolating ourselves. And that's our community: TikTok, Instagram, and what's happening on Facebook. So creating opportunities to pull people out is a good idea, like Shannon just said. And I know, for example, my work group, our colleagues, they thought of doing a retreat. So we just retreated last week. It was at a casino, I have to tell you, but it was a retreat. We didn't pick up any other habits, but we did get off the digital devices for 2 days, and we did some brainstorming. We did some group building. It was good food to eat, and it was an idea. You have to start somewhere. You just have to jump out and do something. It was a time when we were the Flintstones and not the Jetsons. I have to say that. And a lot of us are still familiar with those times, and we just have to pull some old school stuff out, like somebody said they were doing with their kindergartners. Yes, Melissa,
Exactly.
please unmute. Tell me what you got.
Yeah, well, I know when I used to teach, a lot of people would stay out of the lunchroom because it seemed to be where everybody complained. And so if you could make like your lunchroom have a complaint-free day or something where you can only talk about like fun or personal things, just so that you stay away from that negative.
I like that. So it's being intentional,
Yes.
intentionally choosing the positive side of things.
That's
We
right.
all have something negative to contribute. I know I do. So I am intentionally deciding on this day, right, Melissa, that we're just going to talk positive. We're going to say good things about each other. So I'm sure we would leave that space and that time happier, more uplifted, more energized, less fatigued. And that's simple. That's a simple idea to incorporate.
Mhm.
Very little man and woman labor. It's just a mindset. I like that. I
They
see
have,
Brooke.
Rhonda, they have some great stuff here. Write
Go ahead.
gratitude notes to one another, which I think is absolutely like amazing. One of the things that I do in some of my other organizations is we have a kindness day where everyone that you run into, you give them a legitimate, don't make things up, a legitimate compliment as to how you think about them on that particular day or what it is that they've done. Mindful Mondays, Fun Day Monday, we talked about. Um, and Lynn, of course, reminded us of the employee assistance programs, but lunchtime walking, those things are great. Midday stretch. You talked about the importance of stretching and encouraging words for the moment. A lot of that, right? A lot of being able to compliment and reinforce one another.
Yes, that is worksite wellness. Brooke, I see your hand. I got you.
Okay, good morning. A lot of good information today. I always look forward to these conferences that you guys host, and it's always good to put that gratitude and mindfulness back into our forefront because it helps to know we are appreciated as educators, as human beings, and everything. I was going to say we have a new superintendent in our district this year, her finishing up her first year with us. And she started creating newsletters and has intentionally put in Teacher of the Month or recognition for staff. And I've seen a great boost in morale with that. So I'm glad that that is being done, and that kind of helps us all feel appreciated and know that we're, all in this together, and to always be mindful of, our mental health and helping each other as best we can as educators. Thank you.
Thank you, Brooke. And I'm awaiting my invitation to your beach home.
Me too. When you find it, let me know.
I like that, Brooke, especially coming from leadership, that they're thinking of ways to help employees. I love it.
Sarah says, I like Kindness Day, what we talked about. Um, Chelsea says, be the good morning person. You know what I've noticed? When you smile and say good morning to someone, chances are that they will smile back. Smiles are so contagious. That's why I went and got Invisalign. Um, um, Marcia says, I'll be checking your platform. By the way, I did send a shout out to Invisalign and said, thank you, Invisalign, for the smile. Believe it or not, they actually wrote me back and said, thank you. Start meetings with mindfulness, Wellness Wednesday instead of just, Hump Wednesdays. So I think there are great ideas out here. But Rhonda, thank you so very much for you and Mesa and what you've done. This is just so positive, and I really do want to thank you all. I am a fellow educator. I also teach at several, as you know from Rhonda, at several medical schools and psychology graduate schools. So, as someone who is part of the school system, I thank you all. You truly are the heroes. Everything that you do, America turns its lonely eyes to you because you are bringing our children into the future and helping them save us from a world that we've created which is not so healthy. So thank you for everything that you do. I tip my hat to you and I honor each and every one of you. Thank you for what you do.
Thank you, Dr. Gardier. Thank you so much. You guys, what do you think? This was great. I'm uplifted. I love it. We had got great information. We're in the space with a celebrity, and we did some great brainstorming. I love it.
Where?
Yeah. Write your autograph right there so we can copy
Yep.
it.
Thank you,
s-
everyone.
Yes, yes, we love it. Thank you so much.
All
And we
right,
can't
my
wait to see you
pleasure.
back again.
All
Next
right,
time we
thank
got to
you.
get you here in the flesh.
I would love to do that. Thank you
Okay.
so very much. Goodbye, everyone. Have a productive day. Love you madly. Bye-bye.